Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Knicks Film School Pregame Show. My name is Andrew Claudio, a.k.a. GMAC, and it is time to preview another Knicks matchup, this time on Wednesday night into Thursday morning against the Portland Trailblazers. Yes, if you are watching this live, we are doing this at midnight, and if you're re-listening to this or listening to this later on, yes, we did this at midnight for multiple reasons. One, I'm on West Coast time officially, so shout out to this West Coast trip the Knicks are on that's forced me to adjust my schedule. The second thing is that I want to accommodate my guest and his schedule and my guests in general and their schedules, and rather than have them wake up early their time, rather do something late at night in the evening their time, which is why we're going to chat with my good buddy Danny Marang in just a second. This Portland Trailblazers team is very fascinating, though, and I haven't really had a chance to dive into their numbers or how their season's been going. The Scoot Henderson thing seems to be getting better. There's a Denny Avdia hive that is resurging after a pretty impressive second half of the season. There's future Hall of Famer Tumani Kamara that is on the scene and doing outstanding for the Blazers. This is a team that would be in the play-in right now if they were in the Eastern Conference. But unfortunately, they're in a conference that doesn't allow 500 teams to make the play-in. So we'll talk all about it. Welcoming back to the Knicks Film School Podcast from the Jack Ramsays podcast, from 1080 The Fan, the Danny and Dusty show, and of course the host of Rip City Wrap Up on KATU News. Right?
There you go.
I got that right. Danny Marang, welcome back to Knicks Film School.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. Look, man, I can accommodate pretty much anything as far as time goes. Anyways, I'm up in the morning. I'm up late at night. I don't have a schedule. I don't really sleep. My wife kills me for it. So
yeah,
but, we'll do some late night. We'll do some late night New York love. I like it.
I appreciate it. City that never sleeps for a reason over here. That's for sure. And I'm living proof of it, as many a person will find out that if no matter when they reply to me, there's usually a good chance I'm going to be able to reply to it instantly with my sleep schedule. But regardless, this West Coast trip that Knicks have been on, obviously they lost Jalen Brunson at the beginning of it, had a tough loss against the Lakers and a tough loss against the Clippers, then a very impressive win over the Sacramento Kings, a bit of a get-right game. And now they come to Portland to play a 28-38 Trailblazer team. Already hit their over for the season, which is a good thing. A lot of positives to point to. I almost wonder if there are too many positives to point to as far as the tank standings. Currently sit at 10th in Tankathon, but you wonder if at a certain point winning starts to matter. So, Danny, I'm just going to turn it over to you. How are the vibes in Portland after 66 games in which there's been some positive, some negative?
They're mostly pretty good. I think that the tides are shifting a little bit because the play-in was a real possibility a couple weeks ago. And following the trade deadline, General Manager Joe Cronin said he wasn't going to take away the opportunity to pursue the play-in. And while I disagreed with that, I was like, it's kind of steering to the skid. They need a little bit of help there. They were playing and have been playing legitimately good basketball. And so even though I disagreed with it, it was still one of those things where, like, I understand where they're coming from. You know, they were going through hell in late December. I mean, they were broken. They were fundamentally broken. Scoot Henderson was awful. Shaden Sharp was awful. Anthony Simons, Jeremy Grant were struggling. I mean, guys just weren't happy. And there was no, like, locker room stuff or anything along those lines. It's just nothing was really working. Don McClingan had a couple big-time performances. Then he sprains his MCL. They pretty much avoided a ton of major injuries until really late in the season. DeAndre Ayton gets the pretty bad calf strain. Robert Williams III is obviously always battling something, unfortunately. Matisse Thybulle is probably going to make his debut tomorrow against the Knicks this season because he had maybe the worst ankle sprain I've ever seen in my life that he suffered the day before he was supposed to come back in December after coming back off of a little bit of work on his knee late in the fall. But beyond that, like they've been playing real basketball, and Chauncey Billups is a big component of that. And after having a very rough start here and then trading away Damian Lillard and kickstarting the reset, the stuff that Chauncey has really been pushing for and preaching, the buy-in, the defense, the mentality, the nastiness. When he first got here, he said he wanted this team to be a team that nobody wanted to play against. If you don't come correct, they're going to make your life hell. They're not this great offensive team. They're not even the best defensive team, but they just get after you. And they just have a bunch of dudes who are just going to get after you for 48 minutes. And if you think you're just going to walk in and beat them, it's going to be a night for you. I mean, this last trip, they've lost 4 in a row. They played 9 games in 9 different cities. They played 9 games in 15 days. It was a trip from hell. They go 4-3 on the actual road trip. They come back for 1 at home against the Pistons. It came down to the wire, and then they play a back-to-back last night against the Warriors, where they had multiple opportunities, but they just couldn't quite get over the hump. And a lot of that is because it's young guys. They don't know how to win. They haven't been in those situations, and they're tired as hell. They got home to Portland on Sunday morning, and none of them unpacked. So they just went.
Wow.
They played their game, and then they just got on a plane after the game and went to the Bay, and then it came back last night. So they're happy to be home. You guys are going to be the first game for a 7-game homestand, and they play you guys, then the Raptors and the Wizards. So they're 5.5 back of the play-in with 16 to go. The math ain't really mathing. I could see a potential world where some of the veterans, they start getting some tendonitis. I could see that knee tendinopathy was the injury parlance that just really afflicted quite a few guys the last 20 games last year.
So the Portland pivot may be coming is what you're saying. Yeah.
I haven't heard for sure that they might go that way, but with the way the math is, they're 10th in the Tankathon standings. They're only a half game ahead of the Spurs and the Bulls. And they really can't improve their number 1 pick odds to get the Cooper Flag sweepstakes. That if they went from 10 to 8, they'd go from 3% to 6%, which doubling it is great. But they double their top 4 odds. They go from 13.9 to 26.3. And if they somehow found themselves in a top 4 pick, it would be a case of having your cake and eating it too, because your young guys got to experience a little bit of pressure playing in some games that mattered down the stretch. But also you have the opportunity to get a reinforcement with a top 4 draft pick, or have a major asset as far as capital is concerned to make a big move like they made last summer with Denny Avdia.
So January 19th seems to be a pivot date for me when you're looking at their stats.
That's when
especially on their schedule.
The wins started to come, but you started to see it really on the new year.
Okay. So let's start the new year then. Like, what changed?
Number 1 for Scoot Henderson. I want to say about it was December 20th, 21st. I think it was just before Christmas. Jason Quick of The Athletic wrote about it. I wrote about it. Chauncey Billups pulled Scoot Henderson into his office and kind of read him the riot act about his defense, and just just threw defensive clips up on the board and just let him see how bad he had been. And Scoot has said, I didn't even recognize myself. And he admitted that his offense or lack of offense or involvement in the offense was impacting his defense. And the way I was told from other players and coaches was Scoot came out of that meeting in practice and was an absolute demon. And, he had monster game after monster game after monster game. And I really want to drive this home. Scoot was horrendous through his first 88 games of his career. And when I say horrendous, I mean below Emmanuel Mudiay. I mean below New York legend Sebastian Telfair, when you're talking about EPM, BPM, like through the first 88, 90 games. And I was getting ready to write like Scoot's first 100 games. And I'm like, this is bleak, man. This is bad.
Right.
And you look at the tracking through the first 90 games, and it's just down in the dumps. And then it just jumps up. And Scoot has not just like saved his career towards like, oh, he'll be fine, to he's almost back on the path of like, he could be pretty damn good. And you start kind of thinking like, I never thought Scoot was going to be this multi-time all-star, all-NBA guy. I always thought he was going to be really good, but now he's back on that path, and it's kind of mimicking the De'Aaron Fox, Darius Garland jumps that happened. The same kind of, steepness to his development. And the great thing about it is he doesn't have bad games anymore. Like even if he even has a poor shooting night, he takes care of the ball, gets them in their offense, finds other ways to contribute, gets aggressive in passing lanes, gets them out in transition, grabs some rebounds, works on the offensive glass, like just does all of the little things. And he doesn't allow the night in, night out stuff to really impact him. So that was the kind of the first jump. Anthony Simons kind of found his game. And that's, the big part of that, because he's the offensive gravity is so important for them, because he's the guy that defense is key in, night out. And then Denny Avdia has just been a monster. Yeah. I mean, his first month here, 6 weeks, was pretty rough. He couldn't finish anything at the rim. And I tried to tell everybody, like, look, guys, He got here in late September. Everything that's going on back home for him. It's a brand new city. It's a brand new culture. I was talking to him right around that time, and I'm like, "How you doing, man?" He's like, "I'm doing good. It's just a lot." He goes, "People forget because I've been in the league already 4 years. I'm 23, man. Like I don't even know like my trainers' names. Like I don't know where to go. I don't know who to see. I don't know where to eat. Like he's like, I'm still unpacking. It's just there was just a lot of stuff, and he was just like, I'm just trying to settle in. And Denny is a maniacal worker, and he's kind of an a-hole in the best possible way. Like they really needed that. Like his aggression is like, I think it took him that first 6 weeks to kind of feel comfortable in his own skin around his teammates, kind of get to know guys, how you talk to guys, who you can kind of go at and who you can't. And in that December time period, you really started to see Denny kind of rise. And there's one moment where him and Scoot got crossed up an assignment. And it wasn't a bad thing in the sense of like, Denny was, personally mad at him, but he's just barking at him in the timeout, kind of, giving him the fingers to the chest, like, what are you doing? And they ended up both kind of getting crossed up, but it was a sign of like leadership taking hold and kind of the pecking order settling in. And I say all this without mentioning maybe the most important guy in the sense of the talisman. It's Toumani Kamara.
Mm-hmm.
Toumani Kamara is that dude. Like, he's averaging 13, 14 points a game, but that's not what it's about. He's one of the 10 best defenders in the NBA. And he is
already.
Yeah. Like, and I don't say that kind of stuff lightly. That's not the kind of thing I just kind of throw out there. I've talked to probably a dozen all-stars throughout the season about after playing him. And it's the same same thing every time. That dude's a bleepity bleep. Like, he's just like, I hate playing against him. I hate playing against him because he's going to pick you up at 85, 90 feet and wear you out. I think every month he's been in the top 2 in the distance covered defensively. When you look at the second spectrum data, he has the highest load when you're talking about acceleration and deceleration. So he's not a guy who's just kind of jogging around the court. He's start, stop. And he's one of probably 4 or 5 guys in the league where you can literally say he can cover 1 through 4 and even 5. This is a guy who spent an entire game on Nikola Jokic and did about as good a job as you can do on Jokic, particularly given his size. And with him and Denny, their attitude and their effort and their intensity with the way they play, and this was the kind of thing that kind of pushed them. If you don't match them, you stand out like a sore thumb. And everybody just started coming correct. And that's been the big groundswell. Their biggest issue really is young guy stuff, turning the ball over, not executing in really important stretches, a lack of shooting overall through the roster. Like there's just certain things that they're just not going to be able to overcome this year. But outside of this road trip where, they were just exhausted, they're just a team that they're just going to wear you down, man. And they just got a wave of guys that are going to get after you.
So a lot there to react to. So just give me a second. The January 19th date that I talk about, since then they're 15-10 with the 4th best defense in the league over that stretch. They're, like you said, about middle of the road, about 15th in offense. Pretty efficient team though. So they're figuring out ways to score points when they get shots up. The turnovers, they are 26th in turnover percentage. So that is a thing too. And then when you sort the roster of from that January 19th date, Scoot up to 36% shooting from 3. Toumani Kamara 41% from 3 on 4 attempts. We should just have a Toumani Kamara conversation real quick. I know you're saying he's that dude. I know that 6'8" wing. Shout out to my buddy Bryce Simon over at Game Theory. He speaks glowingly about him too. So
he's going to make.
We're talking Dyson Daniels. We talking.
He's going to make second team all defense, and he's going to be a dark horse for that 5th spot in first team all defense.
Second team defense makes sense, especially with some of the injuries that have happened this year. But so I'm going to ask you to fill in the blank here. In 2 years, Toumani Kamara will be blank. So we saying like perennial all-star, perennial all defense, one of the best. Okay, so that's the evaluation.
Last year, he was a dude, and you're like, man, I wonder, like, can he get there? And this year, he has just been a monster. Like he's mastered the dark arts. He leads the league by a lot in charges taken.
Yeah.
He leads the league in offensive fouls drawn. Like he's just a pest. He's up there in deflections. He gets steals. He gets chase down blocks. He can cover 1 through 4. Like the Blazers switch more than anybody in the NBA, I believe, still. And 2 years ago, the Blazers employed that defense, and it was god awful. They just didn't have the personnel to do it. I believe they're 4th in defensive efficiency after switching. Like even with some guys like DeAndre Ayton and Donovan Clingan, who are not real great at switching, they're much more now DA is significantly more athletic than DC, but you just when you've got Denny and you've got athletes up and down the roster. Chris Murray is another guy who's just a tough defender, and you probably wouldn't have seen that coming because he was such an offensive minded guy like his brother in college. They just kind of have these wave of wings that they're just going to keep coming and coming and coming. And they're all 6'7" to 6'9", tough, strong, and it's just difficult to deal with. And the Blazers don't have to go, all right, hey, we really need you to take on, if JB was available, it's like, we need you on JB and we'll just kind of deal with everybody else. Now it's like, all right, JB's hot, go deal with him. Okay, Mikhail's hot, go deal with, like, they can kind of deploy him a little bit more freely. Yeah. As opposed to having him
liberally,
yeah. And I think it's been good because as an opponent, you can't kind of scheme him. And I'm going to be really interested to see how the Knicks kind of deal with him tomorrow, because without JB, that's going to be a little bit of an issue, I think, because most teams, when whoever the primary ball handler is has too money on him, they run him through at least 2 screens before they even get into their actions, because they just don't. He's the kind of guy that can quite literally blow up your offense. Honestly, he reminds me of OG in the sense of like
that's what I was going to ask. If you're telling me he's a point of attack guy, but his off-ball defense is just as elite, and Anunoby is, I don't want to say he's bad at the point of attack, but the smaller guards give him some issues, and you're better off deploying him off ball, off of a Mikal Bridges, off of a like in gap help against Deuce McBride or Josh Hart.
Just blows up actions at times.
Yeah, like if you're driving past Anunoby, there's a chance that the cookie jar is empty.
Two is more of an 2 is a little bit quicker, a little bit more slithery. OG's a little bit bigger, stronger, where I think he can be more disruptive in that off ball and that helper situation. Where 2 is, for his size, because he's 6'8", about 240. He's a strong kid, but you see him navigate screens. He's not like Mikal, where he's impossible to screen, but he's incredibly slippery.
In years past, yeah.
Well, yes, you know what I mean. Like, just a guy that's just so hard to screen. Like, it's hard to get your body on his shoulders and kind of split him down the middle, kind of a deal. And so, 2's just great at just avoiding that.
What I gotta ask is what teams that switch have been doing this season. Now, this is more what they were doing when Jalen Brunson was healthy. Mm-hmm. But with Josh Hart on the floor, and pre-Sacramento game, Josh Hart was just not even like a bad shooter, or not a good shooter. He just wasn't a willing shooter. I'm sure you can remember from your time.
That month before he got traded to the Knicks, man, it was crazy. He just stopped shooting. It was I had a video with him back then, and he was just like, he was kind of angry about it. Like he was really done talking about it, and I was like, hey man, like, you were getting like 7 a game up. Now you're at like 2. Like, what's
the 2 would be welcome. Over the stretch that he was in. Now, what's funny is his buddy, Mr. Brunson, in that pod they did, they had a clip that went viral of him leaving to go to the bathroom, and the friend, Josh's friend that does the pod with them, said to Jalen, like, he's got to start shooting. Like, it's 4-on-5 when you guys aren't playing, and when he's not. And Jalen was like, yeah, we're telling him, like, shoot the ball. And since then, he's been a more willing shooter. Yeah. Now, you're catching the Knicks a game after acquiring PJ Tucker, who
I saw the clip.
The locker room vibes of PJ Tucker. Josh Hart got 7 threes up, hit 4 of them. The Knicks hit 22 threes on Monday. So obviously, look, I come from the Mets world where Grimace threw out a first pitch and apparently saved the season. So I think the Knicks might have their
you believe in the vibes.
It's right. So the vibes are very up at the moment, and we'll turn to anything to associate and apply credit to where I wanted to go with this is teams when Brunson was playing, if they were switch heavy and Josh Hart's on the floor, they're putting their center on Josh Hart and putting their biggest wing defender on Cat. So if it's Houston, Dylan Brooks is guarding Cat. If it's Boston, Drew Holiday's guarding Cat. Now, like the bad teams were doing it too. And it's like, all right, we're putting our center on Josh Hart. And like last night, Valanciunas started on Josh Hart, but it became like, even with Brunson not playing, and A, Hart made him pay, and B, anytime, like I think Tibbs kind of schemed this in, like anytime Valanciunas found himself on Cat, it was an auto pass. Like, okay, like we're crossing half court, Valanciunas is on Cat. Before they switch this, let's get the ball to him. Do you think Chauncey will, especially with Rob Will back, will either stick Rob Will on him and have Kamara kind of move around and take turns on Anunoby or Bridges or Josh Hart or Miles McBride? Or do you think he starts on Cat and they deploy that same strategy?
It's going to be interesting because Donovan Clingan is their really only truly healthy center right now, with the exception of Duop Reith. And Wap's really just kind of out there as a floor spacer. Jabari Walker is another guy that they've kind of put in that vein. Is getting some small ball five. With Clingan, though, because he's a rookie, because he came from UConn, where, you know, they just said, hey, you're 7'3", 290, stay in the paint. And I mean, the Blazers right now, I want to say they've got about 400 possessions with Ant, Denny, and Clingan, those four guys. And then it's kind of piecemeal after that. But those four guys, pull this up because I actually had it. They have 387 possessions together, okay, on the season. They're in the 99th percentile in point differential. They're at 18.4 positive. Defensively, they are in the 100th percentile at 99 a game. They put Clingan as close to the paint as they can, and they kind of live with some of those cross matches. They zone him up a little bit. They kind of throw some junk in there. So even when they have their 55 defense, which is their all switch, they try not to. They do an all switch with a little bit of a catch. If they can get Donovan to retreat quick enough, they would rather do that. So it's going to be interesting because the stretch five types have really been difficult for Donovan. I had him on my podcast last week, and I asked him about that, you know, because he dealt with Evan Mobley on that road trip that they just went through. And he's like, yeah, I'm really still trying to figure out how far I need to go, how far I can get back, and when I can switch and when I can't. If you haven't seen Donovan Clingan yet, when you see him on the court next to everybody else, you're just going to go, holy crap, he's huge.
Yeah, I walked past him at the Win at Summer League last year, and my wife, who's God bless her, all of 5'2", so like the whole week, she's just staring up,
looking up.
But just like the whole, like we met Channing Frye, like he's been
Channing 6'10", yeah,
like 6, but like not Donovan Clingan, and even Channing Frye was like, oh hi, tall person. And
Donovan is a mountain.
Clingan even more so, like was like almost touching the ceiling. So.
He's a mountain of a human, and so it's going to be interesting, kind of see what Chauncey does with that, because without JB, it's going to be different. And so for the Blazers, they're looking at that probably like, okay, and Chauncey obviously is very familiar with Josh and tried to put Josh as a primary ball handler very regularly. So he's aware of him as that guy, as that lead initiator. I would imagine 2 starts out with him just so they can try to muck it up a little bit. I think that's probably what Chauncey will do. You'll
not
probably
on like Anunoby or Bridges. You don't think they'll go that direction?
No, I think they'll put Denny on OG. I think that's probably the way
that makes sense.
Do it.
The 4 on the 4. That makes sense.
And Denny's strong, man. Denny's 245 and he plays super physical. Denny's I would say better than average defender, but he makes up for it with effort. He doesn't have the quickest feet always, and so and Josh can be quick. He can be bursty. McHale, that's what's going to be interesting. You know, does Shaden get the McHale assignment? Because Shaden, his biggest issue is when he's when the ball's in front of him, he's pretty good. When he can fall asleep off ball, and McHale can get him with some back cuts and some back screens and stuff like that. I mean, Shaden was pushed to the bench because of his defense. He came off the bench. That would happen in the beginning of January, and a lot of Blazers fans were pretty mad about it. They're like, he's the future of the franchise, and Chauncey flat out told me, look, man, I care about these guys. I care about their careers, and I don't want him to think that he can only play one side of the ball. And to just Shaedon's credit, the last 3 weeks, he's been a monster, and he's been figuring it out defensively. He's finding a way, same way Scoot did, as far as finding other ways to contribute, being disruptive in passing lanes, grabbing rebounds, hitting the offensive glass, just being more aggressive. And I think they'll probably, just because Mikal, while I think he should probably be on the ball more, it kind of is going to sit back a little bit in that regard. They're obviously going to have to deploy him as a primary creator just to mix and match, just to kind of get a little creative without JB, just because JB soaks up so much offense. But I think knowing Chauncey, I think he'll start 2 on Josh just to kind of be disruptive and see if he can junk it up a little bit.
I guess if you're saying primary ball handler, there's a chance it's Josh. There's a chance it's McBride. There's a chance it's, look, they were taking turns bringing the ball up.
That's what I mean. And
that's how you do it with Jalen Brunson. I will say, and the movement from certain people I don't pay attention to, as far as like, oh, are they better without Jalen? I don't think anybody's logically saying that. There is everybody gets a chance to touch the ball concept.
It's a little more egalitarian.
Well, you learn how to play without him, and you become a better team when he comes back. Then is, I think, the thing that a lot of people are looking forward to seeing if they can do that over this stretch. And through 2 games, the first game against the Clippers, everybody in the starting 5 took at least 12 shots. And in the second game, everybody took at least 10 or 11, and nobody took more than 15. And it was just this very balanced approach to how you replace Jalen Brunson with everybody. So we'll see how
basically what the Blazers have been doing since January now is, even though Simons usually gets more shots than everybody else, if you look at the shot distribution, unless some guys really got it going, you see 6-7 guys with somewhere between 10-15 shots.
Yeah. Looking at the most recent game against the Warriors. Now, Danny Avdija had 34, 16, and 6. So that obviously stands out, but the entire starting 5 had at least 9 shot attempts, with 13 off the bench coming from Scoot Henderson. Yeah. Just a big picture question about the Blazers, because I just said coming off the bench, Scoot Henderson. Of this young team that the starting 5 of, like you said, Clingan, Shaedon Sharpe, Anthony Simons, Denny, and Toumani Kamara, that's like a solid learning how to get better starting 5, right? And one of them, I think, is going to have to leave in order to have your former number 3 overall pick to eventually make it into the starting 5. Who in your mind is the odd man out?
I mean, Simons is the one everybody points to. The thing that nobody wants to talk about is, what if one of the young guys gets traded?
Okay.
Because, and then, like, do you like it? I think it's so much of it depends on the lottery and what kind of moves that they make, whether they draft somebody else. Because if, let's say the pie in the sky happens and they land top 4.
Yeah.
If you're not taking Cooper and you're not taking Dylan Harper, if you land 3, you get Ace Bailey, and then you get the wing guy that maybe you can go forward with. And then maybe you do go, hey, Ace is a little bit more ball dominant, and having a guy like Scoot makes more sense. If you land 4 and now you're looking at VJ Edgecombe or Kasparas Giakoušionis, like, you're kind of like, okay, those are both real point guardy guys. Do we believe in Scoot more than those guys? Or do we shop that pick and that player to some other team and go get a wing or go get a premier 4 or whatever it is? And like, you start wondering, okay, do we need more shooting? Do we need more creation? Do we need more of a floor general type in Scoot? Do you is there a 2 guard out there? And Shaedon's the guy that ends up going out. And I think that's really the question this summer is, of those 3 guys, Scoot, Ant, Shaedon, who's here for the long haul? And everybody immediately points to Simons as the guy out. And it's like, well, the flip side is that's the guy that shoots the cover off the ball. And everybody's like, oh, you're just the Ant guy. You're an Ant guy. I'm like, no, I'm a guy that has offensive gravity that scares the crap out of opposing coaches guy.
Creation's a thing. Yeah.
And look, and Ant has his deficiencies defensively, but you look at how opposing coaches treat the Blazers.
Yeah. I'm staring at the way the Knicks were played with Randall and without Randall. And while I do think they got better in the long term with Cat, there is something to a second creator that I don't want to say that Cat isn't a creator. There's a lot of times.
It's a different kind of creation.
He just becomes a floor spacer entirely too often. Yeah. Some of that is on Tibbs. Some of that is on JB, just kind of going heliocentric, especially in crunch time. But like Randall, when he had the ball, there was a gravity to him where teams loaded up, and he was a good enough passer. Like, you're seeing it in Minnesota right now, where he's learning, or guys are also learning how to find the gaps that he can pass to, So
100%.
It's why I understand where you're coming from, where it depends what they potentially get in the draft. If that's good enough to replace the usage that an Anthony Simons would command, it makes sense,
It's all about fit. And I think that's the thing but it's a good problem to have, because it all kind of depends on what are kind of the thing. And the biggest question for the Blazers, I think, for the Blazers fan base and just kind of where they are going forward, they have this team of a bunch of just really good players. There's no one that's great. Like, I think Denny at his best is like, 18 to 20 points, 7-8 boards, 5 assists, which is a really, really, really good player. But can that be your number one? And I'm hesitant to get that to that point. Shaedon Sharpe, when he's at his best, is an absolute physical freak. But the consistency is still not there yet. And I think even at his very best, you're talking about probably a really good number two. Like a guy that can get you 25 and 5. Like that's to me his absolute peak.
But you need a number one.
And that's the thing that they're looking for. And right now, and everyone's like, oh, that's purgatory. I'm like, well, the entire roster, with the exception of, Jeremy Grant, is like under 25. It's not purgatory, guys. They're still really young.
I'm also staring at a 25-game stretch of 15-10 with a really good defense. It's what the Rockets did at the back half of last season, which now leads them to a 5 seed potentially in a loaded Western Conference. So, I'm intrigued by this Blazers team going into this matchup. I've had to kind of keep my distance only because the Knicks haven't played the Blazers yet this year. So I haven't had
Which is weird. We usually have an early season matchup.
Dude, this schedule in general is weird. The 2 times they play the Warriors are last Tuesday and this Saturday. So I haven't thought about the Warriors outside of the national conversation about them all year. Miami, one of the Knicks' biggest rivals. The Knicks played them game 4 and they played them this past Sunday. So like when I first saw them, it was like the Knicks hadn't figured out how to use Cat yet. And that was his breakout game. But there was also like, oh, don't worry. We'll see them later on in the season when Jimmy's fully in shape and playing games again. And then you shit-eating grin. Obviously, you're enjoying the downfall of what's happened in Miami after what happened 2 summers
Who
ago.
could have seen it coming?
I like your profile picture, by the way, making fun of Jimmy Butler.
I will say 1 or 2 Heat players found it very funny too. For those who don't know, my profile picture was against Miami. The Blazers social media team, I went full emo Jimmy. My hair was down to my shoulders up until about a month ago.
Really?
And, no, it was ongoing.
Gotta be hard to maintain.
Not really, because I'm old and ugly. It doesn't really matter. I just kind of brush it back and throw a hat
on.
On.
Maintain it. That's
no. It was great. It was great. There you go.
There you go.
That's full on emo Jimmy. My wife flattened the hair out and went full plaid. And as I was walking in, the Blazers social media team, like, you're doing a walk-in photo. And so they snapped a bunch of walk-in photos, and a couple of the Heat players gave me a little nod.
Okay.
I had a couple guys pull me to the side, like, okay, that's pretty damn
And you're
funny.
not going to say who?
No.
Okay, gotcha.
No.
Well,
they don't need to get in any nonsense for that.
You've enjoyed the downfall of the Miami Heat from your perspective, and I've enjoyed it just as a hater of all things Miami Heat. So we're copacetic there. Last question before we invite the live chat to participate in this show. You're not your first rodeo, so I usually turn over the show at some point to ask my guest if you have any questions about the Knicks, the season they've had, the first year of Karl Anthony Towns. Like what are your Knicks thoughts or inquiries? What have it?
When we were talking ahead of the show, you talked about how much the Knicks fans are not really enjoying the team as much.
Yeah.
And the F. Trae Young chants and the Bing Bong and everything, the joy that kind of comes along with the build seems to have died. Like every time I've got a lot of, not only the Knicks Film School guys, just Knicks fans in general that are in my feed, people that I've talked to over the years. And you guys, is somebody going to staple McHale to a wall? Like what's going on here?
I don't even think it's McHale at this point. It's very much just a Tibbs thing.
Is it? Okay.
I don't want to turn this into a Tibbs conversation because I'm just tired of having the Tibbs conversation.
Oh, you mean the same conversation that it's had about Tibbs at every stop?
But it's an evaluation of the playoffs. We will evaluate him by his playoff resume. And as of right now, compared to previous Knicks regimes, he's the best coach they've had since Pat Riley, maybe Jeff Van Gundy. I'm not ignorant or closed-minded to say that like a different coach couldn't potentially reach a different ceiling, but that is a conversation after we see what he does with this new roster. And look, I think we're at the point this season where we just got to see what happens in the playoffs, and that'll be the evaluation on Tibbs. The actual vibes going away. Look, it's just a shame that this really good basketball team that before Jalen Brunson got hurt was on pace for like 55 wins. Yeah. Danny, they haven't won 55 games since 1997, and they're on pace for 55 wins. And like they're coming off of last year where the vibes could not be like that's a second round team that got blown out at home by the Indiana Pacers in Game 7, and they got a standing ovation as they left the court. Because of how hard that's like, but when I talk about like the antithesis of like what the team is now, like last year they leaned into all of the Tibbs tendencies. Like DiVincenzo's like, leave me in the game. Hartenstein like almost popped his Achilles and was still like, I love Tibbs. I'm always the most prepared. Josh Hart didn't miss a minute for like a month and a half.
Yeah.
And like Jalen Brunson became an MVP candidate. We all became Villanova Wildcats. This whole thing became this identity of like New York, this city. We're tough. We work hard. The train's out. Great. I'm walking 15 blocks. And now this team is much more finesse, and Mikal Bridges fades away instead of taking contact. And it's just a little bit different. Now, again, 2 all-star starters or whatever version of the all-star team you want to call it. They 2 guys are selected to be starters. Yeah. And I think it's a my fun thing that didn't need to have expectations went away, and then the expectations showed up with 2 big trades, and as we know, that's the thief of joy. So that's my psychoanalysis of it at the moment.
It's just been very interesting to watch from literally the other side of the country of like, man, it's like I know that things aren't perfect, but they've got a really good team and things make sense, and it feels like if something just goes their way, they could find themselves in a good position really quickly come playoff time. And it's like, y'all need to chill.
Danny, this is the thing I hear from everybody outside of New York. Shout out to Sam Vecini and Bryce Simon. They're like, you guys know you're going to be like the 3 seed in a very good conference. Like, that's like the Knicks are very good, and Tibbs like is very good. Like, obviously, you find like if you need, it doesn't have to be an indictment of Tibbs if they were to move on. Just like it's not an indictment of JB Bickerstaff that the Cavs moved on. He's going to finish second in Coach of the Year. However, like, it's still a very good basketball team that we're watching, aside from, some of the frustrations against the top 4 teams in the league, No,
100%. I'm like, for Portland fans, when after Dame got traded, the line that I used was, you keep saying you want to tank. You aren't built for this. You are fans of an organization that had a 22-year sellout streak. It was 24 years straight in the playoffs, and not just like kind of getting in by the skin of your teeth. Like you grew up watching this team. If you're my age, you grew up watching this team in the finals twice. The teams that they lost to were the Jordan Bulls and the Shaq Lakers. Like, you were the second best team in the league twice. Like, and then, you go through the Jailblazer era, and then you get Brandon and LaMarcus and Greg, and that gets ripped from you from injuries. It's like, then you had Dame for a decade, and you had real like cultural currency. Like, you knew that on any given night with Damian Lillard, you could win any game. You went to the Western Conference Finals 6 years ago. It's like, so when all of a sudden they're like, winning 22 games, you have people like, what are they doing? What direction are they going? It's like, it's been 1 year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
and
so
like, dude, what the funniest thing is, it's the opposite here, where it's like they're on pace for their most wins since 97. And it's like, it's been 1 year of championship expectations. Don't have to win it this year.
Yeah. It's like, you haven't had this in
to
a
the
long
Celtics
time.
and losing to the Cavs is not like, oh no, the whole thing failed. No,
it's not the end of the path.
It's year one.
Step one. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. And I think
it's just 2 different sides of the same coin.
I think what I've tried to do is really more be empathetic of where the frustration's coming from. There just was a lot of fun that came from the rise of competence, and
that's big of you. I try not to be empathetic to those.
Well, some it's partly my own thing where I need to, for my own sanity, go to the empathetic side. But I also recognize like there was a fun thing about just watching Emmanuel Quickly with no expectations and RJ Barrett without knowing what the ceiling was. And like that pandemic shortened season,
I remember the Star J moments and the IQ profiles as Darius Garland 2.0. I remember all of it.
Yeah. And now we tune into Raptors games to watch our spinoff show. This fun. Like the Minnesota Timberwolves became one of my favorite League Pass teams, not because I like the Timberwolves, because I wanted to see what Devo is up to and what Julius Randle would eventually become.
On the vibes front, it's going to be an interesting contrast because the Blazers played the Warriors last night. And I sent a tweet out about this last night. Over the past 25 years, there are two Blazers who will never, ever, 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 ever again be welcome in the city of Portland. Raymond Felton and Gary Payton II. And Josh Hart is going to come in, and when he gets on the floor and he is announced, there will be a roar. Like it.
Approval?
Yeah, they will. They love
Josh Hart.
They will love. That's the thing. The contrast between GP2 and Hart is going to be such a stark one because even though Josh was only here for a little bit, man, we kind of joke about Blazers legends in the fan base here. Like if you come here and you play hard and you do all the things that you need to do, this city will love you and adore you. And Josh Hart embodied that in his 18 months here. And there are still people like, oh, Josh Hart's one of my favorite players of the last 20 years. Like it's so crazy. So that's one of the little plot lines. Like when he scores tomorrow night, there's probably some fans are probably going to cheer. Like not even Knicks fans, just like I was going to say
the Knicks fans also travel.
When
Deuce McBride takes a jumper tomorrow, you'll hear the Deuce chants at some point. But
they don't travel like Raptors fans do down here though, because all of Vancouver, Canada descends because the Raptors are Canada's team.
Right.
When the Raptors come here in a couple of days, it is so crazy. It's like half the crowd is Canadian fans that come down for that one game a year.
I will take it as a compliment that you said that. Well, New York is not the same as an entire country.
Yeah, it's one of the weirder things. I'm always like, God, there's a lot of Raptors fans here.
Yeah. Before we get out of here, let's go to the live chat. So I'm going to start with he used to be an intern for us. Now he's part of our staff. Jeremy Goldstein. Daredevil was amazing tonight. Let's go Knicks. Don't know why that was super chatted, but thank you, Jeremy, for letting us know.
I love it. I'm going to go watch after this. So
there you go. I will see. Here's the thing about Daredevil. I know that the new season started. I don't remember a thing from the first Netflix run.
See, I had already watched it, but my wife hadn't, and she was getting ready to go on a trip, and so that was the thing that we watched. That way, when she came back, so we could watch. She goes, "Don't worry, you can watch ahead, and then we can just watch it back again." So we went through over the last, I'm going to say, month and watched the first 3 seasons because there was some stuff in there that I forgot. I was like, "Oh, that's right, crap."
I'm saying I want to do the same thing.
Yeah,
but that we're talking 3. These aren't 10 episode seasons. These are like 12, 13
I think
episodes.
12 or 13, and each one's like 48 to 54 minutes. So
so I need to carve out that time, which may be the summer, Mr. Goldstein.
Yeah,
but I'm glad Daredevil was amazing tonight.
I will say you can get right into it though. Stuff will just kind of come back. It'll help you with some refresher stuff, but you'll be able to dive right in.
I don't remember half the. I remember there's a guy named Froggy, and then Foggy. See, I need to go rewatch a show.
He had a glow up, baby. He had a glow up. Love it.
Oh, even better. That's a Disney money right there. Dirty Dancer. What is the long-term number? Who is the long-term number one option? Shaden Sharp, Scoop Henderson, or someone else? I think we kind of had this conversation.
Yeah, I did. I don't think they're on the roster right now. I think they've got a bunch of guys that you could say are number 2s. Definitely some number 3s in there. And that'll when they get that guy, that'll be the moment that they take off, or it comes for a soft reset if they don't get that guy in time.
Yeah. So Coker time, a Blazers fan watching. Blazers fans would be going nuts if we were 3rd best in the conference right now. Thank you for this perspective. And I think that's honestly the entire theory, like the main goal of the mission statement of the pregame pod is, Knicks fans, you're complaining. Let's go elsewhere. And so I cannot wait to have a Mavericks pod in a couple of weeks when the Knicks play Dallas. Did you hear the Simmons and Russillo pod that just happened where Russillo asked the question, would you rather be a Mavericks fan or a Sonics fan right now? And nobody knew how to answer.
Look,
would I rather my team not exist or not?
I've got a bunch of buddies that cover the Mavs at Dallas. Kirk Henderson runs Mavs Moneyball. And they are, I talk to them pretty regularly, and it's just like
friend of the pod, by the way. Shout out to Kirk. Yeah.
I can't imagine, like, looking at it from afar. It is like, I wouldn't begrudge a single one of them being like, I don't care about this team and I will never care about this team ever again. If like, it would be, I can't even go as far, because the Blazers have the only player they have ever had that you could say is Luka great. Like, you could actually say could be a top 5, top 10 player of all time. Right.
Yeah.
If he hit all of his ceilings, is Bill Walton. And the Blazers got him for 5 years, and they won a title. He won an MVP. He won a Finals MVP, and I wasn't alive for that. So I can't even imagine, like, if you took Clyde, and let's say Clyde took the Blazers, to the finals against the Bulls, and the next year they dealt him to the Lakers.
Yeah.
I mean, they ended up dealing him to Houston, and it was a big deal. But like,
that a lot had happened, though.
Yeah, but it wasn't Clyde, and it wasn't 25-year-old Clyde.
So I gotta be honest, it's much more. There's a found money thing in the fact that they didn't just draft Luka; they traded for him on draft night, and like, you already have that. Oh, we pulled the fast one, and now he's ours. Feeling to it. Mm-hmm. Then you made the finals, and then, because that will always be the thing that will always, like, trading Luka in a vacuum. It's nuts, but if you do it right, okay, fine. You're rebuilding. You're going nowhere. Like, guys,
you trade him for one of the 10 best players in the NBA.
Mikal Bridges got 5 picks. If you're telling me you couldn't get 8 or 9 for Luka or whatever, like,
whatever it is,
entire franchise's future is what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that Nico walked away from that deal thinking, I won it, like, I got Anthony Davis in a pick, I won it, is what will always be what blows my mind. It's what, to your point about that fan base, the chanting at the Dallas FC games, fire Nico. They're chanting at medieval times in Texas,
and that's
fire Nico. Right, like, wherever you go, it becomes a thing. So
it's the worst trade in the history of sports.
It is, like, and that's a high bar to clear, and I think they cleared it.
My co-host of the radio is like, this is worse than trading Babe Ruth.
Oh my God, I didn't even go back to that.
Yeah,
the reason I didn't go back to that is because this is my baseball nerd in me. They sold Babe Ruth. They technically sold
fair. But he has started calling it, instead of the curse of the Bambino, it is the curse of Luka Doncic. Like, and this is a specter that will hang over that organization.
You know how tough it is to turn me into, like, a Laker fan? I want that to go as best as possible in LA.
Just so it screws over.
I just wanted to. I need the arrogance to be
crushed into oblivion.
Exactly. Yeah. I need it to be have consequences, basically.
Like, for me, it's just nasty. Like, being from LA and hating the Lakers even more, I can't do it, but I also love Luka, so it's just like, God, I don't want to do this.
Right.
But at the same time, I want to see Nico, like, not actually, but figuratively burned at the stake for just committing basketball treason.
Yeah, they're now arguing in the chat who the best Nick ever is, because you talked about Clyde, and I look, I think it's Ewing, but Clyde I think is like either 1 or 2. So regardless, the reason why I think it would honestly be more like if the Knicks made the conference finals this year with Brunson, and then the Knicks traded Brunson to the Heat and, like, got Bam back
for Andrew Wiggins.
Right. Well, so maybe not even Bam. It's like, oh, we need a shooter, so we went and got Tyler Hero, who's just made an all-star team. Why not?
Hey, why not?
Yeah.
Just brutal.
Last question. He's very active in the chat, so I got to reward him for it, even if some of his takes are nonsense. Kevin Danishevsky, shout out to Kevin, staying up late with us. What's up, Danny? I don't think you are going to like this, but I kind of see an RJ-like trajectory for Scoot Henderson. Not a bust, but I am skeptical about him developing a championship starter-like skill set. I did warn you, his takes are not the greatest.
Now, I've never been an RJ guy. We've talked about this. It's never been my cup of tea. The difference, I think, there is that Scoot is a significantly better and more natural creator than RJ. Like he is a gifted passer and organizer. Like his superpower is like, hey, even being a young guy, especially over the last 2 months, we need to make sure we get a good set here, and he gets him into that. The thing where I think there is some truth to that is
the shooting.
The shooting I'm actually fine with. I think Scoot's going to be entirely fine as a 3-point shooter. I think he's going to be a 36, 37% 3-point shooter. I said that even last year when he was struggling and shot only 33% from three. My bigger issue is he's a 6'2", 215-pound bulldozer of a point guard that has crazy burst that is brutal finishing at the rim. Which, does that sound familiar? That's the RJ.
Getting downhill and then doing nothing when you're there.
This year, Scoot is shooting in the 15th percentile among point guards at the rim, 54%. RJ is in the 22nd percentile while being 5 inches taller.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you're going to say the similarities there, as far as like downhill, bursty, athletic guy that gets to the rim but struggles to convert, like the thing about RJ is his numbers really just haven't improved.
Yeah,
like it's just been pretty much steady between 55 and this year being his career best at 60, but it still puts him in the 22nd percentile. For Scoot, he was god awful last year, 46% at the rim, 7th percentile. This year he's at 54%. So you're already seeing like, okay, maybe he can figure some stuff out. And I think the biggest part for him is he's still so young. He's still so young, and it's like he just turned 21 3 weeks ago. Yeah, 3 weeks ago. So it's like, do I ever see him being Brunson-esque with honestly, the guy that I want him to emulate is JB, is to be a footwork, not necessarily the scorer, but the footwork, and being undersized. And even though you have burst, you don't have great vertical pop. Like Scoot needs a runway of like 4 or 5 steps to really show off his vertical pop. But his burst is still very strong. And so mastering footwork and being able to snake on pick and rolls and being really deceptive about his finishing, that's the kind of path that I think Scoot needs to kind of go down if he's going to be better than a plus starter.
So to your point about the creation, so RJ Barrett this year, which in the times I've gotten to watch him with the Raptors this year, the thing that stood out is his passing, that he's just every downhill drive that you're talking about, he's now finding guys on the wing. He's now finding the open man when the defense collapses. And
that is something you have seen increase throughout his career.
So significantly more when he got to Toronto, though, to the point of like the per 36, which it's funny to look at his per 36 in New York because he was always playing more than 36 minutes. But his per 36, like he was locked in at around 3 assists a game. He goes to Toronto, his first half a season or 20-something games, 4.5. This year, per 36, 6.2 assists per 36 minutes. So like he's clearly finding a creation portion of his game that might, lead to him being a better player. And Scoot already in year 2 per 36 is averaging 6.9 assists per game in both of his first 2 seasons. So already averaging 7 assists at this point in your career. Once the shooting comes a little bit, just like respectable to where defenses have to honor you, then they're under more dangerous. Yeah,
they're undering him a ton. And the big uptick for him this year, since he started to kind of figure things out, is that he's shooting off the dribble significantly. I think at one point in time he was like 2nd or 3rd in the NBA over like a 20 game stretch for off the dribble threes. Now he wasn't taking, like Steph Curry volume. I think he was taking 4.5 a game, but he was shooting he had like a 58% effective field goal percentage off the dribble on like 4 attempts a game. It was like, oh, that's valuable. Look, I'm not expecting you to do that for your career, buddy, but if all of a sudden you're starting to murder guys off the bounce, because that's point guards have to.
Yeah.
In the NBA, you have to be able to shoot off the bounce. And last year, his Chris Fleming, who came over from the Chicago Bulls, he was the guy that worked with Kobe White and got Kobe White into not only a good but a plus 3-point shooter off the bounce. Scoot has just been. It was not a big even a big overhaul. It was being more on balance and being better with his shot selection, not being sped up. It was just reps. And like I will say this to anybody that will listen: the G League Ignite did him absolutely zero favors. It did not do any player any favor. and it set guys back. It was just roll the ball out and figure it out. And it's unfortunate. Like, cause I think particularly for a guy like Scoot, had he had gone to college and played in a real system and really got in development for that at least a year, he'd be ahead of the curve of what he is now.
Well, we hope here in New York that curve takes a downturn tomorrow night in Portland when the Knicks head to play the Blazers. But one of the fun things about this Blazers matchup is we get to catch up, Danny. And
it's awesome, man. I love hopping with you guys. The Blazers were 12-point dogs to the Warriors because they had played so many games and
covered.
So they did cover. Yeah, that last shot from Anthony Simons in the final 4 seconds meant something to a few folks.
Yeah, I always wonder about those last shots that go in if like that. So the Knicks were, I believe, they were +6 in LA the other night, and Josh Hart hits a corner, or Cat hits a corner 3 to cut the lead from 9-6, and Cat hits a 3 to make it like 104-98, and then they review it for some random reason, and it turns out Cat's foot was out of bounds, so they take it off the board, and then James Harden comes hits 2 free throws. So it now 6.5 is what it was. So they would have covered, or at least been down 6. And then just a convenient review. Suddenly it's now a 9-point game again. And then James Harden hits a couple free throws and the Knicks lose by 11.
I will say the line right now is 3.5 for the Knicks.
Makes sense.
That's a little closer than I thought.
Life without Jalen Brunson's a thing.
It matters. It matters.
There's a curve.
I do think you guys are gonna get a win, though. I do.
If they can hit shots, I hate to simplify it to like if they just hit shots, but that's literally going to be the name of the game, I think, unless they're that's the other thing about last year's team is even when they weren't hitting shots, it was the possession battle. It was like, we have a defense that team's going to hate to play against with Hartenstein as an anchor and Anunoby. And like Deuce at the point of attack, and like even DiVincenzo, like just maybe he'll get hot in the fourth quarter, and there's none of that this year. It's like, oh, they're not missing tonight, we're gonna win. Oh, they're missing tonight.
Those 3 guys are gone.
Right. So like it's very much a very straightforward. If they're hitting their shots, we're gonna win. If they're losing, there's a good chance we're gonna lose. So we'll see what happens in this matchup. Danny, it's always good to see you. Thank you for doing this first ever midnight edition here on the East Coast. Before you get out of here, let the fine folks at home know where they can find you and all the things that you do.
You can find me across social media at Danny Marang on 1080 The Fan. If you want to listen to Portland radio, you can listen online at 1080thefan.com. We're live every day, noon to 3 Pacific Standard Time. If you want to catch a Blazers postgame show, it's live on K2, but it's also streamed on YouTube on the K2 News YouTube channel as well. And then Jack Ramsays. I don't do podcasts nearly as often as I like to anymore because I do 82 games of television. So
I'll put the YouTube up there. It's your name.
There you go. It is very simple. And then patreon.com / Jack Ramsays is where I do all my long form writing, which I just wrote about Scoot 2 weeks ago. And then the Blazers playing faster and finally playing with pace for the first time in, 2000, just in the 21st century. So, that's where I get all of the long form stuff out.
Danny, as always, it's good to see you. Thank you for joining me. And thank you to everybody for tuning in to another edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. If you dug it, please head over to iTunes, up a 5-star rating and a review. Especially if you're watching live, please like this video and remember to subscribe. Thank you for staying up late with me here on the East Coast. And if you're not on the East Coast and this was just a much more convenient time for you to tune into the pregame show, you're welcome. I will be back on Saturday to preview the Knicks matchup against the Golden State Warriors. I'll also be hosting the postgame later tonight when the Knicks take on the Portland Trailblazers. Me and Sean with a W. Mr. Hardy and I will be staying up late to recap this one against the Blazers. Until next time, though, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the game tonight, and I'll speak with you soon. Peace.